Alright, so now I'm going to review the Blade anime, which is the final of the Marvel Madhouse animes, which they released. And I have to say that I'm really glad that I saved this one for the last. It's really the best one that they came up with. And originally, when I found out about this anime, I complained with it along with the others about its premise, particularly with Blade dealing with Deacon Frost, which turned out much better than I thought it would. Um, Not without a few faults, but overall, this is a much better entry into one of the Marvel characters than what the other the other three animes were. Even the X-Men, which I enjoyed to an extent. Um, this anime works so well to me, or at least as a Blade fan, more of the movies and less of the comics, because at least for the first 6 episodes of this series, it feels like you're watching an anime that has no ties to the Marvel Universe in any ways, with the exception of Blade being in the first 6 episodes, and then once Wolverine pops up in the 7th episode, that feeling kind of dies away a little bit. Um, the anime does really well at holding its own in terms of what the other three entries did. It takes the best things about Blade, particularly from the three movies. Yes, even some aspects of Blade Trinity are in this, but they are much better executed in this particular premise than they were in the third film. Um, the origin is expanded upon a little bit. There's some liberties that they kind of take a little bit with exactly about how Blade's mother met her demise at the hands of Frost. And about when he started killing vampires, which is fine because a lot of Blade's backstory is not well known, and some of the origins that were supplied in Tomb of Dracula and subsequently following series have kind of been disregarded, and a lot of the tropes of him from the movies made it in here, which, again, I'm fine with because he's not really an established character that a lot of people would know outside of the movies, so I'm cool with that. So yeah, we do bring in a lot of the stuff from the movies. The entire deal about the glyphs and the Vampire Secret Society and the Purebloods against the Turnbloods going, Deacon Frost being the upstart in the vampire community, all this stuff is here, which is pretty cool. I especially love the first episode of the series, or actually I think it's bleeding a little bit into the second episode too, where Blade has to wind up teaming up with a cop and trying to find young girls who have been kidnapped by this strange tiger vampire, and they're being drained of blood, and Blade has to fight like a shitload of vampire cats, which is crazy, and which is even more fun because they do a lot of things with the vampires that I actually didn't read up on this one as opposed to the other ones. So I had no idea that they were taking the vampire notion as far as they were. Particularly because we're not dealing with the Eurocentric vampires or the standard vampires that you see in Western films that we're used to. We're dealing with vampires in other cultures. We have the were-tiger vampires, werewolf vampires, harpies. We have some kind of strange Polynesian vampire, which looks like a dragon and detaches itself and goes flying with its intestines hanging out and feeds off of people. The little devil-looking vampires, like this is like a Mike Mignola meets Blade in anime, and it's just awesome. I don't know if this was the intention of Marvel or not, but for some reason, just the premise of this alone and its over-the-topness just works so well with me. So I don't mind seeing different types of vampires brought into this. Some are pretty cool, and some, like the little Malaysian devil vampires, were kind of sucky because they were less of a threat than what they thought they would be. And there's just a really lot of good character stuff going on in here too, with Blade in particular. And even when he picks up the sidekicks, we have, again, taking from the movies, we have a Whistler, sort of, for Blade. We even wind up having sort of a Dr. Karen character brought into this who's combined with Whistler's daughter from the movie, and they kind of roll them up into one character. She's interesting to watch in this. I don't actually have a boring moment with this series, even for the fact that it ran 12 episodes. So there's a lot of good stuff going on in here. I really like Blade's background from, especially the narrative that they give about his childhood and his being raised by one of his aunts from the 4th episode was really cool. It gets pretty freaking sadistic at times, but it's still fun. And we get to explore some other cultures, particularly again with the, I guess, Polynesian or Eastern vampires, whatever the flying creature with the intestines hanging out was. We get to explore a little bit of that tribe. That stuff is cool. This is not like X-Men where you have slow goings and just boring exposition. There is never a dull moment in this series, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, you know, there are a couple of drawbacks that I do have to pick qualms with. We don't really get to explore Frost's conflict with the Vampire Council as much as I would have liked. Although we do have one of the Council's lackeys hanging around just troubling Frost and giving Blade shit, and it's still pretty cool, especially for how hard it is for them to fight and take this guy out once the middle of the series rolls around. So, you know, on its own merits, if they didn't have other stuff bleeding in from the Marvel animated universe into the series, it would have worked well on its own merits. Now, when I get to the episode which Wolverine shows up in, I thought I was going to hate it, and I was actually pleasantly surprised that I didn't hate it like I thought I would. They still use the Joe Dirt Wolverine, which shows up in here, and actually it's kind of beneficial for me to have watched this after the Wolverine anime, because it kind of establishes that, hey, a lot of the stuff that happened in there, the Dragon Palace being rebuilt in Madripoor, and the Kikyo character, which I also hated him showing up in First Regard, but actually there's a little interesting back history in between him and Blade, which is revealed, which is pretty cool. So the episode with Wolverine, you know, I still hate the design on Wolverine, but the episode in which he shows up for this particular series is not bad. There's actually some good to be found in it. And everything just builds up really well to the end. And this particular series did so much more better than better than Wolverine, because, like, when the Wolverine series was marching on towards to its end, and we get the big middle finger from Marvel about having every character besides Wolverine die towards the end of that anime, this is not that bad. There are characters who are attached to our protagonists who died throughout the course of this, but their death is not without purpose. So I thought that what they did with the characters, and even until their demise, still worked pretty well. And I'm especially pleased by what they did with Deacon Frost. There are some interesting turns that they did on his origin, which they pseudo-adapted from the comics. Like, obviously he doesn't have the old world old man look that Deacon Frost had from the Tomb of Dracula comics. They kind of made him younger, but he looks more like Marcus from Highlander, Search for Vengeance. And they kind of made something interesting. Like, I thought there was going to be no character exploration to him, and the downside of this would be that there was a complete one-dimensionality to Frost's character in this. One of the last 3 episodes flushes out Frost's backstory. Like, what are his motivations exactly into getting into the beef with the Vampire Council? And we find that out because he had suffered a personal loss at the hands of vampires, but you know, and you might be tricked into thinking, well, you know, he could be a sympathetic character that I would still feel sorry for when he dies. And then they throw this other twist in here, which kind of is counterproductive to me of at least flushing out a villain and his motivations, because he's Uh, Frost is teetering on the edge of madness in this, basically by his loss and then his sense of morality about his experimentations with humans and with vampires in this, which really just shows how twisted that he is, and him sitting there and comparing him and Blade as two sides of the same coin really just shows how twisted his logic is and how much more of a danger that he is than the purebloods. And there's a lot of that that's great. I think if there's really one big complaint that I had about this series, besides the fact that every time that Blade goes up against Deacon that he loses up until the finale of this series, is that Blade is portrayed as being, this calm, collected individual who's, a terrific vampire killer. Even when he had to go up against his former sensei who taught him swordsmanship, he still managed to hold his own pretty well. But the Blade in this series has the problem that Colin had from the Search for Vengeance anime, which is that every time that he sees Frost, he completely loses all logic and control over himself and just runs at him totally out of control, which is counterintuitive to the character to me. But that's a very small qualm that I have with it. The build-up to the end, which concerns the final battle, can be a bit anticlimactic, and it does take on some standard, typical stuff that you see out of a lot of these animes, but it's still an overall satisfying conclusion to it. And I think the one thing that bugs me too is I hate that this doesn't get a second season, because it left off on a really good reference to a particular artifact from the darker corners of the Marvel Universe that he was shown to have been getting involved with, and I really hate that we're not going to see a continuance of it. But overall, this is a really, really well done series, and if any of the animes you have to check out, I'd highly recommend checking out this one.